Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Gina Bryant and I am the webinar facilitator for the Best and Brightest Companies to Work For. Before we begin, I just have a few quick announcements. Today's broadcast is eligible for 1 hour of continuing education credit with SHRM and HRCI. In order to receive your credit, please fill out the survey that will be emailed to you later this afternoon coming from SurveyMonkey. As mentioned, our broadcast today is being recorded and will be available to view on the Best and Brightest website next week. If you have any questions during this broadcast, please use the chat feature you see in your lower left-hand portion of your screen. We are going to answer questions as they come in. Today's webinar is Best Practices for Remote Hiring and Onboarding. Our presenters today are Kelly Feest and Louis Song, both from Proven Recruiting. Sarah Horton is also joining us from Vitaloop. I'd now like to turn this call over to Kelly, and she will kick this off for us. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. I know we've got almost through this week and, quite frankly, halfway through this month and then the year as well. It's going really quick. Excited to be helping to host this call this morning. I know we've all been through some interesting times lately and really looking for some direction and insight and really just thought process around, how the community can move forward and kind of what that means for every company individually. So just a quick introduction about myself. I've been over here at Proven Recruiting for just under 6 years. I'm one of our managing partners specifically for the technology and IT division. Really most recently focused a lot on the client side as far as the relationships are concerned and really supporting a variety of businesses specifically here in San Diego as well as Los Angeles and Dallas and across the nation. And, my excitement for this call is to provide insight and support from different angles as far as hiring and onboarding is concerned and really sharing maybe some thoughts about different clients we're supporting and how they're going about different processes. Real quick, I want to turn it over to Louis and then Sarah so that they can share a little bit about their backgrounds and you guys know who you're hearing from.
Thanks, Kelly. This is Louis Song. I've been in recruiting for, way too long. It seems like half my life at this point, for over 25 years. In technology, finance, and accounting for San Diego, but as well as Southern California and now Dallas and with clients around the country. So I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for having me. My name is Sarah Horton. I am the VP of Operations at Vitaloop. We are a civic tech company based in San Diego, and we really focus on building products that will help increase voter turnout, which is super important for this year, and hopefully strengthen American democracy. I started my career in HR, so I'm very passionate about people and culture and hiring and onboarding specifically. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some things that have worked well for us so far during this pandemic and learning from you guys as well.
Awesome. Just an additional add-on, one of the reasons we were especially excited to have everyone hear from Sarah is that her company is currently looking to transition to 90, if not 100% remote, and recognizing some of the opportunities they've come across and some of the things they've discovered more recently as making that a successful transition. So we're excited to let everyone hear from live examples, specific scenarios, and really get your feet wet knowing how everything's getting done well for them. So just getting into some of the slides and go over some of the details of thoughts that we have and conversation that we can get started here. And again, like Gina said, we are definitely open for questions throughout. I'll try to take a pause at the end of every other slide so that if something comes in, or honestly, even if someone has a great commentary or an example to share, we're excited to make this an open discussion for everyone to benefit from. So just diving right into it, we recognize.
Sorry to interrupt, but one thing I think that Sarah said that was really important is that we're here to learn as well. We don't want to pretend, we're not going to pretend that we have all the answers. We're going to share some of the things that we're doing, but there's a lot of people on this call, and I just want to make sure that we have the opportunity to hear from you guys as well in terms of some of the best practices that we may not go over today, just to make sure that we're here to learn from the people that are on this call as well. So just want to throw that in there.
100%, and I think we're all learning as we go, right? So if even someone has a piece of advice of what didn't work for them, that's going to be equally beneficial, and I'm sure we've all had some of those. So just moving into some of the slides, the remote hiring process, I think we've recognized and have been talking to a lot of clients about different things to focus on. Potential challenges obviously related to some of that as well, and for this part, I do want to turn it over to Sarah because I know she's having some live experiences with this on the internal side of things. Again, I'm coming from the outside trying to support the candidates and the experience, but I think having Sarah share a little bit about what they're doing internally to make these things effective would be great. So Sarah, I'm happy to hear from you.
Awesome. First of all, I just want to say I agree with everything that you guys can see on the slide. It's really important to make sure that the interview process is moving along with a good cadence so the candidate knows that you're still interested, and it just shows that you're putting a lot of effort into their process and respectful of their time. Tools, we've utilized this, and I'll go into more detail on that. Making sure that your culture comes through. This is something that comes more naturally when you're in person and when they can step into your office. But we've crafted some very specific ads to our hiring process to make sure that that's coming through over video. And making sure also that you are selling them throughout the whole process. As somebody who manages HR and operations for our company, I'm always conscious that every opportunity that you're interacting with a candidate is an opportunity to convince them to want to work for you and get excited about your products. So that's something I learned from Kelly in working with her. So just a little bit of an overview about what we've been doing. So we've definitely changed to spend more time on the first round interview. We did those virtually before, so they were always over video, but it was me and our senior software engineer, and our founder was not involved in that at all. So one thing we did was get the founder to participate in the first round interviews. It really signaled to our candidates, now in hearing feedback from the ones that we've onboarded, that they felt important, that they felt like this was a serious meeting. They also got to hear from the founder directly about what's the vision for the company, where are we going, what does this role do, and somebody that they would report up to because our founder is the technical lead as well. So I think those were really important changes to the first round interview. And then in the second interview, what we did to be more virtually inclusive is we created a presentation that had all of our kind of background on the company, about us, giving them an idea of like a roadmap of where we're going in 2020 and beyond, and also putting the questions on the screen so that if you are interviewing somebody who maybe is not a native English speaker or for whatever reason is like hearing impaired, cognitively impaired, you're not being exclusive to those kinds of candidates. So that's really helped a lot, and we've gotten great feedback on putting the questions on the slide during the interview and sharing our screen. Another thing that we did is that we filmed this office video tour with our bald eagle mascot, which is one of those like big inflatable Halloween costumes. And we just did like a really casual tour. I was in yoga pants and a sweatshirt and just walked them through. And I think they got a good idea for who we are and that we don't take ourselves too seriously, that we enjoy working with each other. And we've gotten really, really great feedback on that before as well. Not as useful anymore now that we're not really considering working from the office full time, but we are keeping our office. So it's something that we thought we could utilize and show.
Sarah, one thing I just wanted one thing I just wanted to highlight to some of the stuff that she's saying and things to keep in mind for everyone is she's pointing out things that people might notice if they were in person or if they were in the office. Even mentioning that you guys are in, yoga pants and a sweater in the video, I think that demonstrates to the candidate, indirectly that you're a casual shop, that you don't need to be in slacks every day. I think showing your sense of humor demonstrates the culture and the collaboration that you have. So I think the takeaway from some of that is that you're giving them an opportunity to experience quite, as best they can, the things that they would get if they were sitting at the office and you handed them a glass of water. That would be a courteous example in person, right? But you're trying to demonstrate that remotely and bring that same experience virtually. So just wanted to say I think that's the indirect result from some of the stuff you're focused on.
Totally.
I've actually got a question already, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I don't.
As a founder, I find it really interesting that one of your founders, or maybe the owner, I'm not sure exactly what his role is, but is he actually interviewing? You said that he's actually doing video calls on the front end with every single candidate that you guys are considering for internal roles?
Yeah, he is, and this is something that, to plug Kelly and the great work she does, we do a lot of the vetting up front, and we don't schedule a lot of first-round interviews unless we're really confident in that candidate. So, for example, we're hiring mobile developers now. Kelly does a really awesome job of sending us every link that they have in the App Store, their GitHub, making sure that we really are confident that this person could be a good fit before we even bring them onto the first round. And I know sometimes that can be frustrating for the recruiting team because they're sending us a lot of candidates and we're not moving them through to the first step. But it's just something that we knew that we had to shift to because we weren't going to get to meet these candidates in person, and we wanted to make the most of the 2 interactions that we have with them.
And so have you seen a noticeable difference in terms of candidates' level of interest moving from the first video call with the founder and then to the second stage in terms of the number of candidates that remain interested in the roles?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had any candidate decline a second interview invitation. We even have them do a 2-hour technical test in between the first and second interview that I did not mention, and we've gotten 100% participation on that. I also think it has to do with the products that we're building. So because we are in the civic technology space, it's really clear to draw the line between what you're going to be working on and the impact that you're making in society. So that I think really excites people. But yeah, I mean, they're asking definitely more questions about the vision, where the company's going. They even ask questions about our funding that they might not feel comfortable asking, VP of Ops or a senior software engineer. So I think that, I mean, it's all kind of anecdotal right now, but I think that I've observed a big shift in interest.
That's awesome.
Definitely. Sarah, the feedback I'm getting from the candidates is definitely consistent with that. And I think one last point about you bringing the founder onto that first call, the candidates are absolutely, nothing against you in the senior software. It's definitely just a different level of engagement knowing that the founder is investing time with them. And then I do think you're very, very smart to do that, and everyone should try to find some version of that because it's actually what's encouraging them to then invest those 2 hours in that technical assignment that you mentioned. 2 of our recent candidates actually took the initiative to complete it within the first 48 hours, even though I believe you guys give them a week. And I think really that truly does stem from the initial first engagement and the level and quality of it. So yeah, you're not able to get that handshake or that eye to eye in person, but complementing that with the founder's presence makes a huge difference. Was there anything else on this slide that we hadn't got a chance to cover before we look for questions and or move on?
I just had one more note to really encourage people. If you are not asking behavioral questions during the second interview, you're really missing out on an opportunity to talk about non-work related things with a candidate. I get a lot of questions in panels like this of, okay, what can we do? We rely so heavily on meeting in person. Maybe we take them to lunch. And if we don't get that in-person vibe, what can we do virtually? We ask, I think it's 15 questions that are not work or technical skill related at all that really give us an idea into how that person thinks, what they might prioritize, and there's lists on the internet of, if you just Google behavioral questions, I can't stress that enough because, it kind of throws them off guard a little bit and you get a more realistic maybe understanding of who they are and how they might deal with situations. And also we kind of share our answers as well so they get to know us. So it's a really good way to easily get to know somebody more personally maybe.
Very cool.
Do you have a favorite question, by the way? Sorry.
Yes, I do. Our team's favorite question is if you have a teleportation device and it has 2 portals and once you put them somewhere they cannot be moved, where would you put them? And we've gotten answers as like small scale as like, oh, my house and the gym down the street or whatever. Or like, you know, can I put it, you know, on the West Coast and the East Coast and then charge money to, you know, commute back and forth. So just like a really interesting thought process we often get to hear where people's places to travel are. Some like really non-lateral thinkers ask about like time travel and outer space, and it's a good conversation starter for sure.
That's actually a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's
Kelly,
no
don't
wrong
tell them
answer,
about
right?
that in
But
advance.
nice. Yeah, I was going to say I did not write that down, but I do think it opens the dialogue to your point. Like sometimes people get on interviews and they're just so ready to be on and kind of have to focus on the job and the job description and their resume. And then I think probably it's a refreshing pace to say, you know, if it was up to you, what would you choose, and just kind of get the dialogue going. So good question. I'm going to move to the next slide. I don't see a question from the panel yet. Okay, so this is an opportunity for us to just think through maybe the moving pieces of what you are looking for, and how to adjust that thinking and then quantify their qualification as the ideal hire relative to the environment that we're in right now. I can't remember, Louis or Sarah, I know you guys, one of you had some good notes about this. Happy to turn it over. I'm sorry, I can't remember which one of you was going to speak about it.
I can take it from here for a little bit. You know, I think especially now that we've gone remote, for us we are pretty much 100% remote, although I'm actually in the office. For the most part, most people have decided not to work from the office for different reasons, and I think there's a different type of self-direction that people need being at home versus being in an office. And so, you know, the type of questions that we ask now in regards to how people operate on their own is very different than, frankly, butts in seats like it used to be. And so I think that's one thing that's definitely changed as we've gone into a more almost exclusively remote environment. But then also, I think from a just keeping up with the times, this is something that actually for Proven that we've been talking about for a while, is aren't culture fits, but culture adds. How do we find people that aren't just that fit the culture, that keep everything the same, but add to the culture of the organization? And especially right now with frankly the landscape shifting and changing as much as it has been, what defines a company as far as their culture is concerned? I think some of the things that you pointed out that VitaLoop is doing in terms of how they portray themselves in their videos and everything else, and the fact that the founder is involved in the initial interview says a lot about who they are as a company. And so, some of the things that we're absolutely looking for as a company are people that can take us to another level, and not just keep us the same, but add to the company, and whether that's from a technical standpoint or from a just whatever different ways you can think about companies and people, just adding to the organization is really important to us. From the technical side, I think in my opinion, I think this is possibly the least important in many ways, because while the skills and the experience is important, the attitude, the skills and experience are something that you can learn over the course of time, whereas in many cases, motivation, self-motivation, and attitude are some things that really don't change, and that's something that you really can't teach necessarily. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I agree 100%. It has been a little bit more of an added challenge to kind of assess these three very important areas virtually, and it's rare to find a candidate that can check all boxes to the same capacity, I guess, if you're comparing them to others. But doing whatever we can from the planning stage to really kind of determine these, whether it's baking specific questions or behavioral questions into your interview questions list to try and pick this stuff up, I think is really what we've had to do now that we're not meeting them in person.
And one thing that I just thought of as you were speaking was, I think it's really important to kind of get an understanding, and maybe this is a bit of a sensitive topic, but how people, what people do outside of work to frankly not have work as their only thing. I've seen with a number of our employees where work was the main thing, really kind of get burnt out over the last 3 months or so, and and again, I think this is somewhat sensitive of a topic because you can't approach all of these topics, to find out what other things that people do to make sure that they're engaged outside of work. I think making sure, and it's hard now because we can't necessarily get together with people. Personally, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for the last 10 years or 13 years. It's been one of the most important aspects of my life outside of work and my family, and it's been kind of that triangle of things that have kept me relatively sane. And jiu-jitsu is one of the worst things that you could do in this coronavirus environment. So I've turned to Peloton, for example. I think Sarah, you're doing that as well. But that's helped me to find a new tribe that's kept me sane, at least physically and mentally, and frankly emotionally as well. And so it's just something else that I think, as we look to people, to hiring people, making sure that work isn't everything, because otherwise I think people get imbalanced and end up burning out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right, and just a couple on the technical piece, a bit more. I know, like you said, sending someone a technical assessment is something that can kind of get that piece out of the way and not make it the main focus of the interview. But I do think there is an opportunity there, and one thing I know VitaLoop does really well, and somehow people can implement for themselves, is they don't make the technical screen a black and white pass or fail. I think you guys really are trying to get to know more about that person, even in a technical sense, and giving them the opportunity to answer a variety of questions, some of which they might not know. And I think, even prefacing it with, hey, this isn't a pass or fail, this is an exploratory assessment. We're excited to see, where you thrive, where the opportunities for growth are, and kind of all the moving pieces in between. So I think there's kind of a reality check with some of those remote technical assessments, again, where you're not, it's not so cut and dry, right? Like remotely, they have the time to sit down and do it when works best for them, when they're in a more natural state, a natural environment. They're not timed, they're not being stared at by 3 or 4 other people, like sometimes will happen in person, and those have proven to be effective in their own right as well. But I think considering that shift, or considering that more open-ended discussion, really allows, like Lewis said, possibly the culture add from a technical perspective too, because you might find that a candidate that is interviewing for a mobile role is also very well at some object-oriented language, or might be really good at something that you don't necessarily need for that position, but recognizing that it's a skill they thrive in from that assessment actually might open the dialogue in a different way as well. So Sarah, do you feel like that is something that's been a success for you guys, or maybe part of the technical piece that's worked well remote?
Yeah, for sure. And it is important to set that expectation with the candidates so they don't put too much stress on it. But yeah, I agree with everything that you said. And it's something that we do review in advance as a team, and then we just ask questions about during the second interview. So we use what we see on the technical test, whatever their strengths are, maybe what areas they're weak in, and we use that to frame our discussion for the second interview to, like you said, save time, but also just focus on the important stuff.
Cool. Before we go to the next slide, I do want to see if anyone else has a suggestion, or I don't know how else other people open their audio, but if you want to type something in, or even as we go to the next slide, feel free to share something that's worked well for you in any of these 3 areas to be able to assess your hires from remote as well. Okay. I think Sarah was going to take this one. I think something that they've learned or kind of had the growing pains as they've changed their environment to remote.
Yeah, I would say, and this is pretty general, but I think the biggest remote hiring misstep that I've definitely heard in people in culture communities is that you're not adjusting for virtual inclusion. So there's a lot of people who have different soft skills and who might not come off as a strong candidate specifically over video, whether it be language barrier, whether it be that they're an introverted personality type, whether or not they speak softly or loudly, whether or not they lean into the camera or not. So there's so many unconscious biases that we have as hiring managers that might play into our decision of like, is this candidate self-directed? Are they a technical fit? Are they a culture add? So really designing your virtual interview process to be inclusive and to try and uncover the strengths of different candidates and how they could contribute to your team is super important. And a lot of this can be done through these behavioral questions. A lot of this can be done with virtual kind of whiteboarding exercises that we've integrated as well. And then just also saving time for open discussion and small talk and making sure that you're making them feel comfortable so they can show up to the interview, with as their best self, we like to say. And then this also trickles down into hiring manager training. So if we have operations or HR managers on this call, it's really important that you have some kind of training in place, whether it's internal or external, where you're teaching these virtually inclusive behaviors, making sure that your managers are aware of their biases in hiring discussions, just because those are so much more amplified in the virtual environment.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I do think a lot of companies have a missed opportunity of making sure that, or maybe it's just an assumption that doesn't go double checked, that everybody does feel comfortable interviewing someone, right? Rather than being the interviewee, you're the interviewer, and maybe, that remote experience is new for them as well. So I definitely think, not assuming that everybody is aware of their backdrop when they're logging on to meet a candidate, or isn't aware of how they're perceived maybe virtually, or kind of what their presence might look like, or like you said about getting questions on the board, or being patient with candidates, that maybe you need to repeat yourself because they're not getting the same in-person verbal cues that they might in an in-person interview. And I think that's one thing we could go another whole topic on, but just recognizing that this is a whole different world. A lot of people are interviewing from their homes. A lot of people have their children there, pets. The garage, the trash truck might be dry. There's just so many things that are variables that, to your point, if they're not aware of those biases, can play to the candidate's disadvantage on accident even. So I think there's definitely a big value add in the training and setting people up on your side as a company as well.
Just to add, I think, although this isn't a mistake, well, it's sort of a mistake, and something that we've started doing more recently in the last week or so, is as we're considering new employees for the company, is not just to limit them to the geographic areas where our offices are currently located, so San Diego, Dallas, and Los Angeles, but now we're opening up the possibility of hiring candidates from anywhere, frankly, in the United States. And that really opens up the population of people and candidates that are now available to us, rather than just the geographic limitations of San Diego, Dallas, and Los Angeles. So it's something that I think as we get more used to this remote environment and the idea of measuring productivity rather than butts in seats, rather than time in the office, it's something that hopefully we see more and more of, because I think it really helps to, again, add different types of people to Proven, or to any company, to Vitaloop, and make us all better.
Yeah, I want to just drive that home, Lewis. This is something that we've definitely had a lot of internal discussions about, is now that we're no longer geographically limited and we've set up our company to perform well and effectively in a remote environment, we need to take this opportunity to diversify our staff in all areas, diversify our leadership team in all areas. I know that we have to be sensitive to the times that we are in right now, and there's a big movement and a social outcry for diverse companies because they make better decisions, they're more effective, they're better at problem solving, and your customers will support you. So it's definitely not an option for Vitaloop to not be diverse, and so we've really made this a conscious effort, reaching out to Kelly and letting her know, like, hey, send us diverse candidates, because we're not going to start interviewing until we have a diverse candidate pool, and just being really intentional about it.
Very cool. I'm going to go to the next slide. I don't see questions, but happy to engage if anyone has one. Okay, we just thought this might be a good slide to add just as a follow-up to some of the stuff we have been talking about, and I don't want to get stuck in the nitty-gritty too much because I think we've done a really good job, discussing what the technical round can look like. Sarah's done a great job of describing how that initial round can be higher quality. I think a possible takeaway more generally from this slide is to not get bogged down or overly critical of the interview process. I think looking myself kind of at the different clients that we've supported, and some of them being really gung-ho during the remote experience, some being really hesitant and kind of, question mark, how do we adjust, what do we do, what's it going to mean? I think just kind of giving yourself a break, and same with the marketplace, to recognize that, you still can have an effective interview process. It doesn't have to be drawn out by 5 rounds because so-and-so needed to get on the video and so-and-so had to do it from the phone, or, just being cognizant of what that needs to look like for your group and still making it a concise experience. One thing I have been telling a lot of clients that I hope everybody takes advantage of and continues to understand is that there are a lot of misplaced, high caliber, strongly qualified candidates in the market right now. Across the nation, right? I think that goes without saying. And so being intentional about the interview process, however it's going to be redefined, however it needs to be adjusted for everything that's going on, making sure that you still have an opportunity to consider those candidates, because, same as I've told a lot of my clients, I'm getting responses, as a recruiter, from candidates that I have never been able to get a hold of. I mean, I've been doing this 6 years, really. Some of them just don't need to be on the market. If they ever do want a new job, they simply work through their network and identify a new company. Whereas now, overnight, unfortunately, a lot of people are without a job. And so recognizing that it is an opportunity if taken in the right light or utilized in the right way, that there's some great candidates out there that your team can have access to. And if you can just clarify what that remote interview process looks like, again, not have to draw it out or not get too overly complicated with what it looks like, using the technology. Maybe that's a good thing, Sarah, you can touch on is some of the technology or the resources that you've been using, whether it's Zoom or maybe the coding assignment resource or platform that you use, but just to empower people that this is a great time to be hiring people. There are some really great people that want to be hired, and again, they're available more often now than I've seen in the past, that's for certain. So I think it's just a good reminder to revisit your interview process, so, however that looks for you. Sarah, do you want to share some of the ones that you do use or ones that you found to be effective from a remote perspective? Or I think some of them are obvious, but we're happy to hear if there's anything specific you guys have done to adjust.
Yeah, let's see. I walked through the interview process in the first slide, but just to add here, we do use a thing that we really discussed internally was whether or not we wanted to invest technology into our remote hiring process and if we needed it. We determined that we can just utilize the tools that we already had more effectively and more efficiently, so we've been doing that. We use Zoom, we use Test Dome for our technical tests, and again, it allows you to have a more flexible kind of scoring system so you're not locked into pass-fail. And then we just used Google Slides and made an iPhone video for the second round interview. So super simple things, I think just being more creative in how we use them and more efficient.
Nice.
I do want to add one thing real fast, maybe a couple things. I had a conversation with a client yesterday who had offices and were looking for people in San Diego, Seattle, and the San Francisco Bay Area. And, even for those companies maybe that aren't going to be 100% remote, one of the things that help to open up their candidate pool, because they're looking for highly technical individuals, is they're now considering, for example, in San Diego, instead of just people in San Diego County, but also people in Orange County, Riverside, and other places, because the commutes are much shorter. Instead of taking an hour and a half to 2 hours from Orange County, which would be a typical commute, you can now get to Orange County, from Orange County to parts of San Diego within 45 minutes. And so as companies start to go through different levels or stages of going back to work, you can now, as people are considering living in more remote suburbs, I think they're called exurbs or something like that, you can consider a greater candidate pool because there's going to be some form of remote work. Personally, I don't think that we're ever going to go back to 100% back in the office like we were 4 months ago. And so the candidate pool is definitely greater, even if you're not 100% remote, just from a geographic and commute standpoint. So that's one. But maybe Kelly and Sarah, you guys can jump in on this as well, just to give everybody a sense of what we're seeing as well from an economic standpoint, at least from an employment standpoint. The last couple of weeks, for us personally, we've seen more recruiters being hired back by our clients and the companies that we're working with. We've seen more of the recruiters that we worked with at other companies started to get rehired back into those companies. And so to Kelly's point, there are a number of highly technical, sought-after individuals that are interested and available and looking, but I think that window is going to possibly close very quickly as companies really start to ramp hiring back up. For us as a company, for Proven Recruiting, our technology recruiting business really hasn't declined at all during this whole entire time frame. We actually grew as far as the technology part of our business from pre-COVID to, I guess, during this COVID environment. And so I don't think that there's a large pool of people that are going to be available anytime soon when it comes to technology professionals. So Kelly or Sarah, maybe you want to talk a little bit about that, just so that people get a sense of what's out there. Kelly?
Sorry, I was muted. We've all been there. No, I think you're right. There's definitely kind of an interesting wave going on, and recognizing that companies that are in a good position to hire will, and recognizing that putting the right moving pieces in place and adjusting, and even like you said, companies considering. It is kind of funny, there's this unspoken assumption that if you live in Orange County, you wouldn't possibly commute to San Diego, but there is a place called Carlsbad, San Marcos, there's Oceanside, even where I'm at, Encinitas, Leucadia. I mean, it really isn't more than a 30-minute commute to South Orange County. So I think, there is kind of a barrier or a blend that's happening where companies are more curious or more open. And I think, too, we've all probably had the experience recognizing that working remote in some cases has increased productivity. I know you guys were both saying about, enjoying Peloton and staying active. Personally, for myself, I think getting out for a workout in the middle of the day has made my day more effective, right, and certainly more enjoyable. So I think there definitely is that shift and that awareness. And truthfully, I think the real shift is going to come from companies continuing in that way as much as possible, or some version of it, because that's going to be a very competitive edge. And I think what Sarah is seeing because of that is she is getting, we are vetting her. It's not supposed to be a kudos to us, but we're having the opportunity to vet some extremely talented mobile developers for her team with that barrier of location completely off the table. We're not saying who's the person that will do a 20-minute commute, who's the person that is okay coming to the office every day. We're taking that completely out of the conversation, and instead saying who's the candidate that has a culture ad, who's the candidate that has maybe some relevant industry experience, that has the best presentation on some of their published applications, that is excited about what they do as a product, that is excited about a growing, like we're able to use the true qualifying factors rather than what now feels like such a limiting component of, again, a 20-minute commute. And I think it's one thing I've told candidates in a couple different ways in the past of not to limit their opportunities, but I know that reality has been a barrier. And so how exciting now that companies can I mean, literally triple, quadruple, 10 times their candidate pool because we don't have to worry about the commute as a drawback. So that's mainly what I'm seeing in the market, is that opportunity to capitalize on it, and excited to have companies be able to do that. We have 4 more slides to get through, and I think we all know the 3 of us have a lot to say. So I'm going to move to the next one just so that we can get some other content. We're moving into, I don't know if it's this slide or this is if anyone can see this, it's just a reminder of the stuff that we just talked about, which we don't need to go back over. But I think this piece is really something that VitaLoop and other companies, I'm sure, are being intentional about and having to be cognizant of. So I want to turn it over to Sarah in 1 minute, but just some of these statistics to consider is that organizations that invest in effective onboarding will retain 50% more new hires than competitors. I'd actually be curious if anybody has a statistic of their own, or just to consider for yourself what your retention even is right now generally, and maybe how that onboarding process could be increased or be made more engaging, whatever it is for you to help with that. And then we've also pulled a statistic that within the first 6 months of a new job, 33% of people will look for new work. That is a general fact. So I think having that as a reality check and then trying to compete with that or address that as best you can as a company. And then also that standardized onboarding procedures obviously lead to productivity. I think that goes, if you have your laptop on time, if you have your logins and access to systems, if you know that you need to send them a monitor ahead of, whatever that workflow looks like, I think just being consistent with it. And I know here at Proven, it's something that we actually have, I'd say pretty confidently down. I know we have an email that goes out that has the 10, 15 tasks this new person's going to need. We have people assigned, whether it's our IT person, getting them up and running on Outlook, and then it's our technology team member, getting them logged into all of our CRMs and some of the sourcing material that we have. It's definitely a workflow, and then even getting down to the fact of what their first week is going to look like, who's going to train them on what. Honestly, even getting them out to a lunch a couple days that first week. I mean, there are very intentional pieces that it's never a bad time to revisit, and I think even re-engage here with the remote components as well. So I'm going to pass this slide over to Sarah, and I think these are some of the things. More recently, I know the last 2 hires they've had are 100% remote. They are not in San Diego. They're not even an hour away as far as a drive, and really having to adjust some of that stuff as well. So happy to hear from you, Sarah.
Yeah, so our onboarding process has completely transformed. Even if we did hire remote employees in the past, we would fly them out to San Diego and have that in-person interaction with them. So we've now onboarded 2 employees successfully during COVID, and it's been really important to us that they feel like there's no efficiency loss, that they're still getting a good opportunity to socialize with the rest of the team and feel really integrated into their new workplace, even though they're working out of their living room. So it's been an added challenge. I would say some of the things that we've done is we, of course, send them welcome gifts and their business cards, that they have that before they even start. So they have all of their company swag. They know that we're thinking of them. Of course, the technology piece has to get there in time. They have to have their laptops. We've also repurposed a lot of the budget that we had allocated to things like a fully stocked kitchen, beer and wine at the office, company outings and events, to making sure that people are set up to work efficiently at home. So we offer, sit-stand desks. We offer to buy them chairs. We offer really to buy them anything that they need from an ergonomic standpoint or a technical standpoint to work productively from home. So that was something that I think people were not sure, hey, can I really ask for this? Can I ask for a new sit-stand desk? And we had to constantly remind them, yes, this is something that we're moving towards more permanently. We want to make sure that you're comfortable. And we've gotten some feedback from the 2 employees that we onboarded that it was super generous. So I think it definitely does make them feel like we're willing to make that big initial investment in them up front, and we want them to succeed. We also do company introductions the first day, weekly happy hours. We set one-on-one check-ins with their manager and with people and culture, so me, so that they're really constantly held space for them to ask their questions, to give feedback. Even if they don't feel comfortable talking to their manager about it, they can talk to me. And we've had some of our new employees to actually take those opportunities to say, like, hey, this is a challenge that I wasn't able to foresee and is actually really, hindering my productivity or work. And we can address it so quickly and it doesn't get to fester. And we're able to problem solve that really quickly just by having these check-ins baked in. And then what else do we do?
I really love that, by the way, Sarah. I do want to touch on those baked-in pieces because again, just getting feedback from the candidates we've supported you guys with, it does feel really good to already know there will be a time and a place and an opportunity and an ear available to address. Even if it's positive feedback, whatever it is. I did get feedback from the candidates we placed saying that they liked knowing that 30, 60, 90-day review is already on the calendar. And then, like you said, the weekly check-ins. And then you might have just been going to it, but I know you were talking a little bit about demo days or kind of how to keep the technical team even aligned on some of their workflow and process as well.
Yeah, so from a technical standpoint, this kind of gets more into employee engagement than just onboarding. But yeah, that's been a huge piece for us as we're doing demo days at the end of each sprint. So we have our sprint review meetings where every employee gets to showcase what they worked on the last 3 weeks. And we also tie it into a spirit day. So we'll do funny hat day or whatever, pajama day. And it's not 100% participation. I will say engineers are kind of hard in general to get them to participate in silly stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the takeaways from that are super tangible and solid. So they get good feedback on their work. They get to feel recognized and appreciated. They have this kind of opportunity and this platform to show everyone, even from other software teams, what they're working on. And oftentimes they're super positive, or they get feedback that's critical and in a positive way, and they're able to, maybe fix whatever errors they had or make improvements. So that's been definitely an engaging part for us, and we know that our new hires have mentioned that they enjoy getting to know what the other team is working on, because we have 2 products. So that's definitely been exciting.
I'll just add one thing. Personally, I think that the remote happy hours have gotten beyond their usefulness at this point, but that's just my personal opinion. But one of the things I think that we've done at Proven that's worked really well is that we started a training program about 5 years ago where we had training, different types of training on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, basically every day but Monday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. And while people initially found that overwhelming, new hires have really found that it's a great environment to learn more about the company, and especially since we had people from Dallas as well as Los Angeles calling in, and now we have people in Phoenix and other parts of the country. It's really helped to really cement relationships and help people to connect that otherwise wouldn't have connected. And so if you don't have a program already, it's definitely something that I would hope you would consider, but it's something that has definitely helped. The happy hours, just, I don't know about your experience for those of you on the call or Sarah's, but when you get so many people on a call at the same time, everyone's kind of talking to each other, it just doesn't seem to work like a normal happy hour. The one thing that we have started to do more recently at Proven is, depending on people's individual preferences, we've started to set up lunches for employees to get together either virtually, one-on-one, or in person if they're comfortable doing that with some of the loosening of the shutdowns. So that's something that we did in the past in person for new hires, but as we've hired people during this COVID environment, we've had to be a lot more considered about how we engage people. So that's just one thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, we've got a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Stacy wants to know, how do you ask your new hires for their feedback regarding their onboarding experience? Do you use a questionnaire, a contact person, a follow-up meeting, structured, unstructured, kind of what is your approach with that?
Yeah, great question. I do a follow-up with them their first week, like Friday afternoon. and that's informal. I do have a list of questions that I ask, and it's been nice to have that kind of casual conversation. And then we also do send out a survey at day 30, and then we actually have a culture check on day 60. And that is more specific, like, do you feel like our culture is meeting your expectations? Have you seen our core values practiced in real life, or have you not? So that's a little bit more in depth, and that is an in-person meeting. So a mix of questionnaires, Google form, and in person, usually with me. But I do encourage our hiring managers in their more technical one-on-ones to just ask generally about how they are personally feeling, how they're doing, if there's anything we as a company can do to support them.
Very cool. Lewis, I'm not sure if you have an official answer for this, but Madison wants to know if you have a recommendation for completing I-9s remotely, particularly for after the temporary COVID flexibility has been lifted. And by the way, we didn't even touch on background checks and how I know a lot of that has been affected, but Lewis, do you know how we've been doing our I-9s remotely, or even after it's been lifted?
I honestly don't know. Sorry. I'll let Sarah take that one.
Yeah.
I do.
Oh, well, Sarah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, we have an I-9 workflow through Gusto, our kind of HRIS system. So they have a whole workflow for completing I-9s virtually. I don't know if they are doing that because of COVID, or I actually am not very familiar with temporary COVID flexibility. So that's something I'll be Googling after this meeting. But they can upload their IDs, and then I also just see them visibly on their first call, and then I sign through Gusto. So it's been easy for us. But if you know something I don't, let me know.
Yeah, I was going to say videos too, so I think you're thinking the same temporary solution that we've been using. I just don't know if maybe there'll be an adjustment on the requirements of that, or yeah, how people will address that. So TBD, Madison, sorry, we're learning with you. One quick last note from myself on this slide, just as far as the remote onboarding, I wrote down a horror story. It's not as scary as it implies, but I think it is good to remember, just be cognizant that there are some team members, and we had a couple team members, I'm thinking one in particular, who got started here at Proven, I think less than 2 weeks before we started to work remote. And it felt like a horror story to me, and I think Lewis felt the same, of just that angst of, is she going to have a good experience? Is she going to stay up to speed? Is she going to have the support that she needs? What if she has questions? How will we know? Kind of like that anxiety of someone that just barely got started and now having to transition their onboarding, which they were so excited to have in person and really enjoyed the first 5 days in the office, and now having to adjust that quickly for them, and really wanting to be as intentionally supportive, as present, engaged, and I guess what avoided the larger potential horror story is that Lewis and I did take on a much heavier number of one-on-ones for this person. I think Lewis is doing one a week. I feel like we're in constant communication every day, formally every week for myself as well. And then we did implement something, or have kind of worked to formalize what we're calling a buddy system, where that person, again, still being very new and still trying to learn the ropes, and quite frankly trying to learn her team members' names. I mean, it's as simple as that, of really knowing how that collaboration works and who is who, and putting faces to names virtually instead of in person. So that buddy system, whether it's getting together the two of them, whoever we assign, once a week, or a quick check-in every morning, or a lunch every other week, again virtually or in person. I think that's maybe something to consider with the remote onboarding, is not just putting all the weight on the hiring manager and maybe that manager's manager, but also those peers, right? I mean, there's some senior level peers that can really step in and help with that onboarding and the continued support, so that they're getting it from a different angle, they're feeling that collaboration from a different point of view, and can really still build those relationships and the rapport that would have naturally come in the office over time. So I think those are a couple things we had to adjust or keep in mind to help there too. So any other comments here before I go to our last slide?
No.
I think that's a great point, in that the responsibility of sustaining, maintaining a culture isn't just on the managers or the founders, but it's on everybody together, especially for those that were hired pre-remote, to really step up and reach out to newer members that maybe you've never met physically in person, and to create those situations, those moments where you're spending time with them one-on-one without the one-on-one check-in or the one-on-one official meeting that managers and employees have. So I think it's a really great point, because that really tells you as much about the company and the culture of an organization as anything.
Definitely. And it certainly makes, what do they say, it takes a village, and I think that gives everyone an opportunity to step up and support everyone. So one question before we go to the last slide, Yolanda has asked or commented that diversity in any organization should be at the helm of the business culture, and she's asking, what role will African Americans play in the role of diversity with the organizational culture? I know, Sarah, you talked a lot about being intentional even from the initial, submittal and vetting process, to make sure that diversity is very present and prioritized. If either of you have anything else to add to that, or anything specifically as it relates to African Americans playing a role of diversity within the organizational culture. Lewis, maybe you could talk about what we're doing with Tiara, the group that she set up.
Yeah. So, I think we're at a really important time in the history of not only our country, but frankly in the history of the world. An acknowledgement of bias and prejudice and frankly hate that has been prevalent in our societies, not just toward brown and black people, but indigenous peoples as well around the world. And so, I think for us at Proven, we did not initially, and frankly we haven't officially put out a statement, because it's important to me that we look inwardly first and look at the actions that we've taken, as well as the actions that we're going to take as an organization and as individuals. And so we started a conversation 2 weeks ago, and one of our black employees actually asked to take the lead in terms of organizing and really trying to understand what we can do as individuals and ultimately what we can do as companies that have lasting and meaningful change, rather than just to put out a statement, rather than just to give money, but to really look at where we are, where we've been as a company and as individuals, and then to look at what we can do that isn't just a time, just to do something in the moment of the time to look like we're doing the right things, but actually really to do the right things over the longer period, which is forever, because this will never be fixed entirely, but to fight the fight for as long as we're around as a company. So just on a short basis, we've had one of our black employees, our African American employees, just take the lead in terms of helping us to understand what we've been doing, right or wrong, and what we can do moving forward, right or wrong.
Awesome. And by the way, just as part of that group and part of the culture here at Proven, I do want to share feedback that a lot of people have really appreciated that opportunity and that platform, and it's a learning curve for everyone, and I think it's got to start somewhere, so we're excited about it for sure. Here is our last slide, which has a lot on it. Maybe if Sarah, you want to pick something to comment on, Lou, you can pick something to comment on, and then we can, if there's a last minute question, we'll try to address it in the next 30 seconds. Go ahead.
I'll just say that one thing that's important in the onboarding process, this is a really clear diagram of just all the steps, but one thing that you want to keep in mind that might not be reflected on this slide is individualization. So during the interview, you really should be looking for clues and signs that, what will this employee respond to? What might their challenges be? What is their work from home setup like? And making sure that you are catering your training, your onboarding, and your entire employee lifecycle experience to accommodate that personal element as well. So that's something we've been doing. And we collect that data through our anonymous surveys on Gusto. And then we also make a point for hiring managers to check in and ask, and encourage people to speak up and voice their individual needs that they have.
I don't honestly have anything more to add at this point. I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and I appreciate Sarah sharing what they're doing, and to think about. And I appreciate the questions as well, because there's a lot that's been brought forth, and also some of the stuff that I've learned is really interesting as well.
Awesome. So it looks like they will have a recording available for everyone, and if I want to pass it over to Gina just for that logistics standpoint, but definitely on behalf of the three of us, we definitely appreciate the opportunity to be a value add or to share at least what we're going through and the experiences we're having, and we hope obviously it resonates with other people and it's an opportunity for growth and improvement and whatever else you can get out of it. So thanks again for having us, and Gina, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Today's webinar was recorded. We will have the webinar and the slides available for you on the Best and Brightest website next week. You can also register there for any of the upcoming webinars we have as well. As a reminder, if you need your continuing education credit for SHRM or HRCI, please fill out the SurveyMonkey that will be emailed to you later on this afternoon. I want to thank Kelly, Lewis, and Sarah for a wonderful presentation. Thank you again, everyone who joined us today. Have a wonderful afternoon. Be safe and stay healthy.